It's my pleasure to introduce to you Ron Painter, who's the president and CEO of the National Association for Workforce Boards.
Good morning. Good morning. Okay. Kind of crazy to think like it's still morning. There is so much like jammed into your brain. It's what I love about Jamay. It's what I love about Close It is the fact like you just get all kinds of like really great ideas jammed at you in a short amount of time. But I hope you're having a good chat with other colleagues. Let me introduce, Sarah mentioned I'm Ron Painter, and I get to be the CEO for the National Association of Workforce Boards. If you're not familiar, there are about 500 plus workforce, local, business-led workforce boards across the U.S. and the territories. They're asked to do a variety of things, from analyzing local labor markets to convening businesses to understand more about that market. They're required and asked to help design career pathways. They operate career one-stop centers. And a lot of that is done under the guise of the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So my role in Washington, D.C. is part advocate, a large part advocate for not only workforce boards and WIOA, but for workforce development as a system. So we argue, we talk, we have dialogue a lot about various pieces of that system and how we fund that system, and increasingly how we need to fund this system, because we understand, and it's part of what's great about this event, you get to see, you understand the facts, you understand that we need people to consider lifelong learning, engage in lifelong learning. We need them to think about what's next for their skill sets. We need companies to be engaged in that. But then something happens. Like, how do you pay for that? So I don't want to be a downer. I don't want to bring you down. But if any of you are sitting out there thinking the water wagon of federal funds is just on top of the hill and it will soon come rolling down and we will all be fine. I don't think it's going to happen. Please don't quote me, because you know the folks at the National Association get a little nervous when I get crazy quotes. But I'm telling you, I'm not sure that's going to happen. I am really excited to introduce to you one of the most, if not the most, innovative workforce board in the U.S. and its executive director, Peter Callstrom, who is the president and CEO of the San Diego Workforce. And his colleague, and I think when we talk about how do workforce boards, how do workforce development partner with higher education, I think Dr. Edward Abeyta, who is the Associate Dean for Education at the University of California at San Diego, is going to help you understand what's in it for higher education and why a research university is engaged with something called workforce development, workforce boards, and something called an income share agreement that may help us solve part of this problem of how do we fund lifelong learning. Peter?
All right. Thank you, Ron. Hello, everybody. Great to be here. And I do want to thank Jamay and Parminder and the whole Close It team for just putting on a phenomenal event. I've been to several of these, and I find it just to be one of the greatest convenings that we have in the education and workforce field. So just a quick shout out to them. They do a phenomenal job. How many of you quickly are familiar with income share agreements? A decent amount. About a year ago, I had no clue what an income share agreement was, but we've been exploring other ways to provide services to working learners and to be able to do this in more creative ways. As Ron pointed out, with federal funding, that water wagon is drying up. It's not happening. We have a lot of federal issues, as we know, with the deficit and the debt and dwindling resources. We cannot count on the feds. Hopefully, they'll always do their part to lay out the foundation for being able to fund the necessity and importance of workforce development. But in the past 20 years alone, that federal investment has gone down about 50%, and it's probably going to continue to go down. So about a year ago, we were looking at other ways to do our work in creative ways, and so we came upon ISAs. And long story short, we put out a few grant applications to philanthropic groups. One thing I guess that makes the Workforce Partnership in San Diego a little unique is that we're a 501c3 also. And we're the only workforce board in the county. So we have no boundary challenges or politics to deal with. It's pretty straight ahead and clear. So with our 501c3 designation, we're able to work with the private sector and philanthropy. And thankfully, some other philanthropic groups believed in us, and we've raised $4 million in the past 6 to 9 months. $3.5 million is the pool that allows us to fund the way for participants to access what Ed will be speaking about. But to back up real quickly, income share agreements are really an alternative to student loans. We have $1.5 trillion debt in the country, and it's a crisis. And people take on this debt with the hope of having a job that will pay it off in years to come, but that doesn't always work out. Income share agreements, we pay the way for the participant to access, in this case, UCSD Extension, our education partner. The cost is only about $6,500. They go for 9 to 12 months in the certificate program. In the first cohort of 100 that we've started, they're all in IT tracks. Once they complete, we help them get a job. They have to make at least $40,000 a year in order to have to pay back to the fund. And so that's the magic of this fund, is that we all have skin in the game. They get good paying jobs. We're building the middle class. Their payment goes back into the fund, so it's an evergreen fund, and we can then serve more and more workers over time. So it's early days, our first cohort's in, all the signs are very good, and then as we go forward and we raise more funds and we have more payback into the fund, we want to expand into all the different sectors that we have within our region. And we've identified 7 priority sectors, so there's a lot of work ahead. But we see this as a great alternative to do this affordably, to alleviate the risk of student loans, and to build the middle class and get people into great careers. So with that, I want to pass it over to my friend Ed, who's leading the UCSD Extension work, and they're a great provider, are not only a world-renowned institution, but they've been very helpful in our ability to even raise the philanthropic funding. Ed?
Excellent. For those of you, I'm just so glad to be back in my home state. We met Notre Dame. I grew up with my father working at Los Alamos Laboratories, just a little bit west of here, and a couple things you need to know about New Mexico. Our state bird's a roadrunner that does not fly. And there's a question, the state question is red or green, and if you want both, it's Christmas. And if you're looking on your laptops and want a little interesting fact, you can look at Bill Gates. He got arrested in 1977 down in Albuquerque because he forgot his license. It's kind of fun to see his mugshot when he just came out of Harvard in Albuquerque. But some of the main things tied to New Mexico is the University of California and our connection to the labs and the skill sets. It's been a rich history working together, and our research has been able to undertake solving some of the biggest problems in our world and continuing to advance our efforts to look at our overall ecosystem around this world. And I think that is a good metaphor and a good way to start this, is that what we do today is an ecosystem that lives linkages between many people and into industry. And for this case, it was almost an interesting adventure to have our research connected to a workforce board. So why would you do that? Well, we understand that to grow within economies, each of our areas that we grow up in or live and work are contextually grounded to certain economic factors and work jobs and so on in the community. In this case, the partnership with Workforce was so special in a sense because we were able to understand a couple things. One, as Peter mentioned, 1.5 trillion is known now as the Great American Affordability Crisis. And as we start looking at, it's also disrupted how our systems of education have actually been deployed. We used to have a linear approach going through, get through high school, go on to college, community college, but now we understand that, as we heard today, that the shelf life of those degrees have a shelf life, and then what we understand is that we have a relevance across the lifespan. We understand that within so much time, your degree, your work needs to be upgraded or reskilled and upgraded, and how do you do that? So that's where extension comes in. We found that in this very specific work priority sector, that we'll come back in a little bit, IT was a high demand, very strong baseline for jobs, and it was really a real epiphany for us at UC San Diego, because we were realizing with Workforce, there was a lot of different linkages, but we really couldn't find something that really elevated our community. So when we started looking at what we had in the priority sectors of computer science, our expertise within that area was a natural linkage for working with students and individuals to work through a pipeline through the income sharing agreement. Now, you understand that income share agreement is really unique because it puts a couple of different pressure points that's not been there in academia. One, academia has to be responsible for good training that gets jobs. Imagine that we're actually being accountable. And that really speaks to the Lumina study that was done years ago that said, when we surveyed over hundreds of higher education administrators, if they were preparing the students for the workforce, only, higher ed was said, of course, we're doing about a 94%. We give ourselves an A. Then you actually did the same questions out to industry, and guess what? We failed. Only 11% we were having preparing for the workforce. So that disconnect was so vivid, and it's where we actually started moving in to working with this income share agreement that did a couple things. One, the accountability of relevant jobs connected directly to high wage, high demand, and what we now at National Science Foundation, you'll hear this up more and more, of no-collar jobs. There used to be blue-collar, there's been white-collar, some of them green-collar if you look at environmental, but now the no-collar about emerging jobs in data science and so on. These sectors actually look at what we call the 60-year curriculum, and if you haven't heard that term, it's this notion that there's lifelong learning across a lifespan, and it starts earlier than just going to college. We're looking at this process in which could we actually take certificates and bring them in even earlier in high school. And across a lifespan, this touches not only through the workforce, but even 50 plus. So you can, some call that cradle to career, K to gray. The most recent has been twinkle to wrinkle. But if you look at your overall ecosystem, it's this notion that relevance in training and engagement, ISA provides an opportunity that breaks the norm. It actually puts into place an opportunity for individuals to go back to school, to actually upskill, and actually work with our partners in workforce that has never been before.
And to add a little bit to how new the concept's been there for a while, it goes back decades actually, but to do this in really practicable ways is challenging. You've got to raise the fund, you've got to have the mechanism, and you have to have the right governance in place, you have to have the right educational partner. But when it aligns, it can really work, and we're a living example of going from idea to cohort in less than a year, and we see this only growing. We see this, our vision in maybe the next 5 to 10 years, this could be a fund bigger than our federal allocation, which in our case is around $25 million. So we really see this as the way to address the skills shortage and the access to post-secondary success for many, because student loans are risky, they're clearly not working for many, and there's so many barriers to access, and this is a way to overcome it affordably, to do this evergreen, as I mentioned, and we're really excited about it. But this whole idea is so new, too, and has caught such attention, not only in some of the work we're doing, but some of the other higher ed space, that there's now a federal bill that's being advanced in a bipartisan way called the ISA Student Protection Act, and we're thrilled for that because in every new endeavor you can have some bad actors, and we want to be sure that there's a really good act in place to protect the students that we're serving. So it's an exciting early time, and I also want to do a shout out to the Lumina Foundation because as one of our 5 philanthropic supporters, Lumina is funding us so that we can support 6 other workforce boards in a test pilot way to be able to share what we've learned so that they don't have to reinvent the wheel every time you do this. So if we can make this work and share with others, we hope to see this spread across America because the workforce system is crucial. The funding is not adequate to meet the need. It's going to go down. We reach over 4 million unique customers in the workforce system, and without alternative ways to support working learners, the American dream is lost. And that's why this is so important. If we can do it creatively with philanthropic and private sector and regional and local partners and great educational institutions, we can really change the way that this, no longer hopefully the skills gap, but hopefully it's going to be this glut of skills that we have in our region. We have 1 more minute, so Ed, if you want to wrap it up, and then we got to go.
Those of you that work in the workforce boards, I just want to let you know, if you're looking at a very disruptive approach in how to connect workforce and a research university that can actually be replicated in your region, Peter's an expert and really been a breakthrough with us in connecting higher education and workforce boards. It's been a great honor to actually be with you today and really grateful to spend some time with you, Peter.
All right, thanks. Thank you all.